Hi, everyone, and welcome back to AI Interconnect, where we explore the intersection of AI, real world business, and the people building the future. I'm your host, Laurent, and today I'm excited to sit down with someone who's not just building homes, but rethinking how we live, design, and scale communities. Sal Patalano is the CEO of ARCBuild, a company that's bringing sustainable modular housing to life with smart tech, clean energy system, and a refreshingly bold vision of affordability. From resilient structure to AI-enabled processes, his team is helping cities and developers solve every real problems. And so great to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Laurent. It's my pleasure. We get awfully large number of invites to do various podcasts, and I'm intrigued by what you're doing, and we're flattered to have received the invitation. So thank you.
It's my great honor and to have you, and I'm definitely very curious and very excited. And thanks again for being here. Let's start at the beginning. What was the moment or maybe the problem that sparked the idea behind Art Built? Was there a personal driver for tackling something as massive as affordable, resilient housing?
Well, the primary concept behind ArcBuild actually goes back anywhere from 6 to 7 years, and the original concept was born out of a need that was witnessed in various parts of the world by our founders. And we saw all sorts of disasters, but beyond disasters, we just saw the problem was not only based in America. The problem is global. There's a lot of efforts underway to provide medical care and to provide food, nutrition, and all sorts of disasters and challenges. But no one really seemed to focus aggressively on the housing issue. Everyone was quite content to go with tents and things like that. So that was really the genesis. That was sort of where the whole idea germinated. And fast forward now to about 2 or 3 years ago, it really started to take form with some investors sparking an interest in a lot of the pilot developments that we were moving through. We went through quite a process of developing and building almost a dozen and a half modular homes before we got to where we are today. My personal driver really comes from my childhood. I grew up in New York City, and we were four kids and a single mom, and we had a lot of challenges, and having a roof over our heads was always something as the oldest that resonated with me. It was quite a scary concept when a 12 and 13-year-old is thinking about, will we have a roof over our heads, right? And on any given day. And my mom is just an amazing human being, tough as nails, and got us through it. But I carried that forward later in life. That was always a concern of mine. And candidly, homelessness is something that I have always taken into my heart. And from a charitable standpoint, my time, my effort, it's always been in the back of my head. So ArcBuild is the culmination of a lot of things for myself and for my partners and for our investors, in that we wanted to provide a solution, something that was affordable, something that was aesthetically competitive with anything on the market today. And as things progressed and got worse with the housing crisis in the US, with almost 7 million homes in need, various types of housing, we began to look at this and we realized we had a solution. We had something that would be good for everyone. We had something that provided a strong go-to-market business model for investors, and at the same time delivered what we think is a critical service back to the community or to the country at large. Not to say we won't expand outside of the U.S. So that was the genesis of it, and here we are, and things are going incredibly well. And I think part of that is while we're very much a for-profit organization, make no mistake, we're a capitalist at heart, but at the same time, we're out to serve a market, serve a need, really a basic need.
That's wonderful and beautiful regarding your mother and the notes. It's not every day you see a company tackle modular living with this level of tech and infrastructure thinking. How did you first validate the idea? Uh, was what was the first prototype or project that made you think, yes, let's work?
Well, the first project, we had a couple that took place simultaneously, but the one that comes to mind is a homeless shelter in Los Angeles during COVID. Um, and this was not the same thing we're building today, but it was something that we quite literally, from start to finish, had set up, and operational in about 6 weeks. And during COVID, California relaxed a lot of their restrictions and compliance, so we were able to do it. And the impact that we witnessed that had on the community, um, was really heartwarming. And from there, we took a step back and we said, we need to do more of this. Right, this needs to happen. Not necessarily homeless shelters, although we do them, and we will continue to do so. But we broadened it out a little bit. We said, what if we really opened the aperture here? Right? Why can't we do that? And we did, and that really became a huge motivating factor for us. And we began building more pilots, and we learned a lot. We made a lot of mistakes. Modular is not what people think it is. Not if you want to produce high quality and you want to get in there and compete with the major builders like Lennar and Pulte and Horton. These are massive organizations. To do that, you really need to take modular to the next level. And it's not cheap, it's not easy, and it requires a starting point, and it requires growth, both from how you manufacture, your processes, the integration of technology, and then, I'm sure we'll talk about, moving all the way through AI and robotics. So we put together a long-term vision of how we do this, and we have one or two distinct advantages over anyone else in the market. And there's some great companies out there building great products, right? But there's more than enough room for all of us. So that's really how things got kicked off and brought us to where we are today.
Perfect, I got it. It's yeah, and hard build arc build isn't just about building homes, it's about building systems. What I see, and you've got solar, gray water recycling, smart layouts, and even fire and hurricane resilience design. Can you walk us through how all of these or those components come together in practice?
Sure. Well, look, we had the advantage of being able to leapfrog, right? As with with many technologies, and you can look at countries like Singapore and some of the work done in Vancouver when it came to telecommunications. Even to some extent Mexico, they did not go necessarily step by step and start with the old Ma Bell lines and work their way up. In many instances, they just leapfrogged and they jumped right to the latest technology, which is brilliant. And if you've spent any time in places like Singapore, you can see it. It's quite remarkable. We were able to do the same thing. We did not come to the table with a background in traditional home building, or what we call stick and brick. That was not our background, right? The people who became the core and are the core today of ARCBuild either had their foundation in modular or had their foundation in technology, which is my background, of course, 35 years in software, going way back. So when we began looking at what we were going to build, we just asked ourselves a very simple question: what's the outcome we're targeting? Ultimately, in a perfect world, what would we like to be able to build and deliver without necessarily breaking the bank, affordable, something that an average family could come in and buy. How do we bring back the American dream? But at the same time, how do we integrate all these technologies if and when they're needed or wanted by our clients? Because we still build, very basic homes as well. Right? But we began looking closely years ago at solar technology, and we studied it. We wanted the right vendors and the right suppliers, and every 6 months it was advancing. Right? It just kept. It seems like the technology just kept getting better and better. The same thing with water recycling. Green water, gray water, and what you can do with it. All the way to the extent of atmospheric water generation. There are technologies out there now that are still being improved where you literally can capture up to 70 liters of water a day from the atmosphere, given the right environment. A lot of that tech, they're still working the kinks out, but it's there. And then, of course, we looked at smart home technology, not too complicated there, right? The tech is out there, we can integrate it. And because we're building in a modular manner, we're building in a factory. So we're in a controlled environment, right? So we can do a lot of things in a fraction of the time that a traditional stick builder can do on site. We're not subject to all of the challenges, the delayed inspections and weather and work crews, workforce. We're not subject to any of that. So we started bringing all the pieces together, and when we took a step back and we looked at it, we said, holy cow, we've got something here that's really special. So now it was a matter of the market driving us, right? What are the buyers? We work with developers. We're a B2B company. Let me say that first and foremost, right? What is it that the developers are looking for? And so we put everything out there. As I just said, we can go from here and we can go from here. What's your market? What's your target persona? Who are you looking to serve? And from there, it's just a matter of pulling the pieces together and building what needs to be built in a very controlled environment in a fraction, literally in a fraction of the time that many of these developers are currently allocating for their builds. So, and we can talk about the economics of it, et cetera. But that was really how the tech came together. And about 25% of our clients today, and we think this number will grow, but about 25% of our clients today are looking for things like solar, water recycling, things like that. They're looking for it. And while just about anyone can come and say, yeah, we'll put solar in the home, or we can give you water recycling, we work very closely with some very, very specific vendors that we have relationships with. And the way we're designed, our engineering is designed to accommodate that technology seamlessly. So we have an advantage based on how we manufacture.
Awesome. I love it. What's something most people still misunderstood about prefabricated housing today?
Well, that's an easy answer, right? People still mistake it for mobile homes and trailers, right? I mean, even my own family, when I stepped in to take over ARC a couple of years ago, and I mentioned to some family members what I was doing, the first thing they immediately thought is that we were doing mobile homes, right? So that's the most common misconception, and the terms are confusing as well because for example, the products you would buy that are, they have a chassis and they're on wheels but are permanent fixtures. They go onto foundations, right? Are called manufactured homes. Well, arguably, you can say we're manufactured as well, but the term you just used, prefabricated, is really the difference, right? Is we are prefabricated, and the thing we like to say is if you look at any home in your community, of course, I don't know about Barcelona, right? You've got some old, beautiful old architectural structures there, but if you go through the U.S. And you go into just about any community, I would challenge anyone to tell the difference between one of our homes in that community or something that was stick and brick built. You can't. Right? They're virtually identical. And modular homes, when done right, are more durable. They are, as I say, we are fire defensible is the term. We are hurricane ready, and we are earthquake ready based on our construction. So that's
Yeah,
that. That's how the technology came into play, and that's my background. I mean, I'm a tech, right? I'm a techie
you're
going way
an
back.
engineer.
Yeah, so
That's great. I love it. Then let's talk about challenges in the field, and let's talk about what's hard. When you're trying to bring something new into sectors like construction or city planning, what kind of resistance or challenges you've hit first?
Well, look, I mean, I'm coming out of an industry where our sales teams were quite literally having a knife fight in a phone booth every day. You know, they were walking in to see a client, and there were 30 other companies that were in there trying to sell the same product. They're all essentially the same, one or two differences. You know, you look at cyber, you know, they're all essentially, they're all great products. They're all the same. Um, with modular homes, the market is wide open. We don't run into competition. Not to say it's not out there. Of course it is, right? But we're not running into it. The challenge, I think, is really twofold. One, getting people to understand exactly what modular is, right? And two, developing a brand and name recognition, right? And arguably, you could say the third would be then delivering on the promises and the commitments. That's a big one, right? There have been a lot of modular companies. I'm sure you did, you know, your homework and your reading, and you see that there were probably a dozen or so that raised in the U.S. that raised, you know, $100 million or more. They're not in business any longer, right? So there's that stigma associated with modular. Now, our business model is entirely different. We operate, and we can talk about this, about, you know, how our factories operate. It's quite amazing. But we operate on a very tight budget, very low overhead, yet we're able to produce extremely high quantities. So you've got to be able to deliver. Too many of these companies made a lot of promises, and I think they had the best of intentions, Laurent, but they never delivered, right? And they're out there today. You know, they're taking hundreds, if not thousands, of back orders, and they're producing 100 a year. I mean, I don't know. You can go do the research and see. So I think it's developing a brand, overcoming any of the stigmas, and then making sure you can deliver. And that's the hard part, right? Making sure you can deliver at the end of the day. Because I've been doing this a long time. You can see the gray hair, right? And I've learned the hard way that it comes down to quality, integrity, honesty. You know, do what you say. What is it? Say what you do and do what you say, right? Something like that. So that's the
Yeah.
challenge, I think, is delivery.
Okay. But what about regulation, zoning issues, supply chain? Is it so easy for you?
All great questions. We'll come back to supply chain in a moment. Zoning's not an issue. Compliance is not an issue. Modular homes are governed identically to going out there and building one with sticks or bricks. There's no variation. There are some other governing bodies within the modular industry and some engineering firms who specialize in it, so that you're meeting the compliance around modular homes. But once you go into a particular county, Mariposa County, or you're going to Dade County or LA County, wherever you happen to be going, you have the same compliance and inspection requirements as someone building a home. Um, so that's not particularly difficult. And your plans, you know, plan set's a plan set. There's engineers and architects working on it, and it's no different. You know, it's it's a plan set. That's what it is. One of the differences being, though, what's less frequent in traditional build, but in our particular instance, it's how we're going, is with steel frame. So we are highly engineered, somewhat over engineered in a good way, steel frame. And that actually makes it a little bit better when we're going into particular counties. I mean, that really is smiled upon, right, for the most part, particularly when you're dealing with hurricanes and you're dealing with earthquakes and things like that. And the other thing I should point out is almost 80% of our inspections are done in the factory relative to whatever state the unit is going to, the home's going to. So we're saving tremendous amounts of time. right? Not having to be on site, waiting for an inspector to show up while, it's about to rain in a week, or you've got winter coming in, and, you've got an exposed homes and things like that. We don't have any of those issues. Now, you mentioned supply chain. That's the most critical element for us. We monitor that like hawks. We have a very strong procurement team, very strong supply chain team, great relationships with our vendors. We're triple redundant on all of our vendors, and they know it. We don't hide it. And being able to manage supply chain and just in time inventory and things like that is critical. We are in the process now of designing some of our own technology based on AI to really help us manage just that supply chain, inventory control, and things like that. Now, there's some products out there, but I'm a software guy, right? I have a lot of techs on my team, and our thinking is we're likely going to build something very specific to our business for how we do that versus going out and buying something off the shelf and customizing it. I've done that. I sold products where clients did that or we did it for them, right? But we're going to likely develop our own tech. So you hit on probably, short of building and quality control, you hit on one of the most critical elements to our business.
Wonderful. I love this. Are there any friction points in the actual client journey, whether it is municipality, developers, or even end users, where the process breaks down or need rethinking?
Um, I would, well, let me frame it this way. I'll frame your question in context of the conversations we're having with developers right now, right? And see if I can give you a pointed answer. When we work with our developers, we typically work with small to mid-sized developers on projects that can be anywhere from 10 homes to 300 homes, right, in the communities that they're working with. If I were to try to determine where there might be friction points, the only one that I think of is really capacity for production, right? They'll come to us and they'll buy several homes and they'll love them. This is great, and they'll start that way, etc. Now they want to come back and they want a delivery schedule on 50 homes, okay, which is wonderful. Don't get me wrong, right? This is what we're building here, but we have to be certain and forecast properly and expand our capacity properly to make sure we can deliver. Now, take that one developer and multiply he or she by 10. Now I have every one of them coming to me, and every one of their projects is critical, and their timing is critical. Why? They've got bank loans out, right? Typically. And unlike a traditional build, they're not getting tranches over 8 to 12 to 16 months. In our case, it's like that. We can literally build and deliver in 6 weeks, right? And then, of course, we've got some installation time on site. So that's the one thing that we really have to be careful of, because a friction point is when you come back and I say to you, Laurent, look, we can't wait to do business with you. This is great. Specs, engineering, everything's in place, but I can't meet a 5-month delivery cycle, right? And we're solving that now, right? We are solving that, and within the next 12 months, 6 to 12 months, that will get better and better and better as we go along, right? So that's a great thing, and I'm happy to tell you how when we get to that topic. But that's the one friction point that we have to manage against. I don't think that will last much longer. Right? I have the ability to scale production at unprecedented rates, literally unprecedented. That is not an exaggeration. Um, and when we talk a little bit about factory and production, I can tell you how and why.
Okay, I love it. I love it. It's okay. Let's start talking about tech first, and this show this show lives with at the age of AI and real world implementation. And what's fascinating about ARCBuild is how much you're back into the process, efficiency, smart design, predictive modeling. Are you using or planning to use AI in your operations?
No doubt about it. As I've already pointed out, we will be developing our own tech around procurement, supply chain. No doubt about that. The other area, and look, we're going to look to apply AI um, judiciously with a lot of thought to virtually all aspects of our business because, after all, we're a manufacturing company. And manufacturing, by definition, lends itself to automation. And these days, automation is about AI, right? So the answer to your question is across all aspects of the business. Outside of procurement and supply chain, the next area we're focusing on aggressively, and we have teams looking at this now, and advisors looking at this now, is going to be our factory floor automation, right? Leading all the way through to robotics. Right? Our manufacturing, for example, if you were to come to our primary facility in Salt Lake City in Utah, and you were to look at how we manufacture, you'll walk in initial and you'll say, where are the production lines? Where are the robotics? Where we don't use any of that. And I think that was one of the downfalls to a lot of the modular companies that raised huge amounts of money and built these massive factories, right? 20 million, 30 million more, right? On these factories. We don't do that, right? Our manufacturing is such that, and this is going to surprise you and to anyone listening, we can quite literally set up a full production facility and be building at scale in under 90 days in 20,000 square feet of warehouse space, which is unprecedented. So our business model, and again, I want to stay focused on your question around AI and automation, but our business model is such that we will put factories in the high demand markets. So we're seeing huge opportunity now in northern Florida and southern Georgia, right? Huge demand. I'm going to put a facility there. Why? So I'm not shipping 1,200 miles, I'm shipping 50 miles to my site locations. And all of a sudden, one of the biggest costs associated with modular, which is shipping and logistics, has become negligible, right? And my delivery times have been shortened as well. Logistics is much easier. I have a lower carbon footprint. We can go across the board with this. And that is, ironically, that is not yet due to technology. That is due to our unique business model and manufacturing process. Right? We really are an OEM for the most part. Now take that and overlay that with technology and AI and various types of automation. I can now run 50 factories, 100 factories centrally. And I control everything from quality control to supply chain to manufacturing process and to scheduling and to delivery. That's the vision.
Okay, I love it. I love it. It's then tell us about manufacturing process.
Well, I can't go into too much of the secret sauce here, right? But I can give you an abbreviated answer and tell you that for the most part, we are an OEM, right? More so than a manufacturer. We're not in there cutting wood, and screwing screws and hitting nails, which is traditional modular. Really, traditional modular, they're wood boxes. Instead of building the wood boxes on site, they're building them in a factory, right? We're not. Our manufacturing process starts with custom developed, custom engineered steel frames, right? And they range right now from standard modules are 10 by 30. We're now developing engineering plans around 12 by 40. We also do 8 by 20. So we have a lot of different sizes we can manufacture. And these are all part and parcel to the type of home or the type of community that's being built by our developers, right? But our process really is built around OEM. So I like to compare us to Apple. I go way back to the early days of Apple. And, Apple doesn't technically manufacture anything, right? Apple is an OEM. They bring parts and components in from various exclusive suppliers and a lot of proprietary components that they bring together, to make an iPhone, for example, or an iMac, right? We are. Think of us as a smaller version of that in the home building space, in the single family space. That's the best way to describe it. But you're certainly invited to come out to our manufacturing facility one day. I'll have you sign an NDA, and I'd be happy to walk you around.
Yes, of course. Yeah, no, definitely, and I would be very honored. Okay, okay, I got the idea. Where do you see the most potential in construction tech right now, from automation in factory to smart material, or even AI-led urban planning?
Look, I think the biggest challenge, and I think the area where companies can drive the most success while serving the market appropriately, is going to be around sustainable materials, resiliency, and most importantly, time to market. That's going to be the key. We can no longer, and this is my opinion, right? We can no longer serve a market with insane demand, with 8 to 16 month build times. It just does not make sense. It's like Henry Ford developing, the production line and saying I can turn one Ford out every 3 days. Doesn't work. That's what we're doing, right? And this is not to take away from the large builders. I have a number of friends who work for them, and they build magnificent products, right? And they're great companies, but the time to market needs to be reduced dramatically. Modular lends itself to that space. I think that's the next big challenge, and we're there, right? And the way you reduce time to market is through materials, it's through manufacturing process, but most importantly, it's going to be through the integration of technology, AI and robotics and automation, right? Because our production time right now is X on a home. As we begin to integrate the technology, it's going to go to Y, then it's going to go to Z, till we'll get to the point where we will work on something along the lines of a true high output production line. Now, in our case, we don't need to do it with a 100,000 square foot factory. I can do it with 20, 15,000 square foot factories. And aspirationally, our objective is to have 100, 200 or more factories around the US. This is the objective right now in high demand markets. And we're seeing the opportunity every day. We're being reached out to by various developers, and we're not even marketing, Laurent. We haven't spent a dollar yet on marketing. And they're reaching out to us, and they're in Minnesota, and they're in Montana, and they're in Boise, and they're in Florida, and they're in Georgia, and they're in Texas. And they're coming to us and they're saying, hey, we have a huge demand. We want to work with you. And it's the first time in my career, and I've been at this a long time, where I have seen this type of demand. But the demand is for the high quality, sustainable, resilient type products we're building. Doesn't mean there aren't some other great products out there. There are. But right now, we really feel as though we're on the cutting edge. And we challenge anyone, to show us that we're wrong. Show us how we can do it better. Heck, we'll sign you up as an advisor. Come on board, right? Show us how we can do it. We can do it better. But we've got a lot of really smart people working on a lot of really tough problems, and they're coming up with brilliant solutions. And bit by bit, we're considering, we're analyzing, and we're integrating, as appropriate. So that's where I think you're going to see this industry go. And I would also add that the traditional builders are not ignoring this, right? They're watching it very carefully, and you know who they are, right? Look at the top 10 largest builders in the US. Almost all of them, I believe, are public, right? Go look at them. They're watching this. In many instances, they're already toying and playing around with it. They have separate business units that are off to the side doing this. Some of them don't even show association between the mothership and these little side projects, or as we like to say, skunk works that they have going on, right? They all know that there's a market for this. They all know they're dominant players, and they all know eventually they're going to be playing in this space. But from our standpoint, there's more than enough to go around. And, aspirationally, and this might sound, this might sound a little heavy for some folks listening, but we don't see any reason we can't drive ARCBuild to a $5 to $10 billion valuation if we follow our business plan. In fact, we're almost certain that we can. And our investors feel the same way. So,
Fantastic. I love it. This is very, very exciting. Um, you have talked about affordable US city of the future in your site, on your website. Um, what does that look like to you? Paint us the picture.
when we talk about affordable communities, I think it's very similar to what you're seeing today with some of these urban communities that some of the large developers are putting up, where they're buying thousands of acres of land, and they're quite literally, for lack of a better term, they're building cities, right? And a perfect example of this is
Sure.
if you go from Orlando to Tampa, right? Orlando is sort of dead center in Florida, right? And Tampa's dead west to the water, right, on the peninsula. If you ride that I-75 corridor, you will see some very large developers who have done just that. They bought up thousands of acres and they're coming in with 7 to 10 year plans, and they are building cities, everything from hospitals to schools to recreational areas to office parks to anything you can imagine, a variety of homes ranging from apartments to condos to townhomes to single family to luxury. And if you take that concept and you add to it the type of technology that we're integrating, the type of resiliency that we bring to the market, you shorten the development time to build out sites like this by 60%. Now, are we tackling anything quite that aggressive? Not yet, right? But we have developers now who have hundreds of acres, maybe not tens of thousands, but they have hundreds. And they're doing this exact thing on a smaller scale. And Disney pioneered this years ago in Orlando with their celebration community, right? They were one of the first to
Sure.
pioneer it. And that area has been hugely successful, off the charts, right? So where I see it going is I see some of your smaller to mid-tier developers doing this, not on quite as grand a scale, and doing it with us, or with the other organizations who may be following what I think is as smart a path as we are. If I can just pat my team on the back just for a moment. So that's where I see it going. That's where cities are going. There's no doubt about it. People want everything inclusive. They want to literally be able to walk down a flight of stairs and walk into their supermarket. They want to walk down and be able to get coffee or dinner or go see a live concert down in an open area, recreational area. They want to be able to walk their children to school, right? These are the things. They want medical facilities within a 3-minute car ride, right? They want dry cleaners. They want fast food. Think about, America it was subject, as you know, throughout our history, coming back after World War II, we were subject to urban sprawl, right? And nowhere is there a better example of that than Los Angeles. But I think what you're seeing now is a mentality where we're coming back together again, right? People don't want to own cars anymore. And don't get me wrong, I'm a huge car buff, right? And America's never going to lose its love affair, with gas guzzling monsters. That's who we are, right? But people don't necessarily want it, particularly my daughter's generation. She's 29. They don't want it anymore. They want everything in a neat, tidy package tied up with a bow. That's where I think you're going to see it go. And to do that, you need you need rapid delivery times. You need resilient technology. You need affordability. Right? You've got to have that, and it goes without saying. You have to integrate technology. Otherwise, you're building a home that my parents would have bought, and they don't want that anymore.
It all makes sense, and you're on the right track.
You
I
think
can see.
so?
If we fast forward 2 years, um, what are you most excited to launch or scale with ArcBuild? Any moonshot bets on something?
Well, the first moonshot is if within 2 years, we'd like to have a minimum of 50 to 75 of our manufacturing facilities set up across the U.S. I would say that's number one. Number
How many are
two,
you?
beg pardon?
How many are there right now?
Well, right now we moved production out of Mexico. We only recently moved everything out of Mexico to the U.S. So we're two now, but we're under plans for four more already. We have plans in process. The second moonshot for us is we really want an ARC build community. We want to work with a developer that we can partner with, right? And develop sort of a flagship the way Disney did. Right? We see ourselves being involved in the build of a very large community that is representative of what I just described, sort of the flagship community. That's aspirational. That's a moonshot for us. But make no mistake, we have really a bifurcated interest here. One is obviously generating a return to our investors. Right? We have some great folks who have believed in this company, who are behind this company. So we obviously want to generate an ROI to our investors. As I say, we're a for-profit business. But secondly, I see us taking a larger hand on the charitable side of this business, and that is addressing the issues of homelessness, emergency shelters, and the other big one is employee housing. This is a real sore point right now. You have some of these beautiful communities in these beautiful areas, and there are folks who work there, predominantly in the hospitality industry, who can't afford to live there. And you're seeing organizations try to pop up really beautiful, beautiful housing for their employees, but affordable at the same time. One of the great examples of this, and I don't know how they're going to solve this, but I lived in Miami for 30 years. And if you look at the Florida Keys, it's a big issue because it's a huge resort and vacation community. And, you have folks working at these hotels and these restaurants and other services, and they can't afford to live within 100 miles of where the resort is. So they're driving all the way back north, towards Miami or the Upper Keys. So we'd like to see ourselves make a real contribution to those areas as well. So it's sort of, like I said, it's kind of bifurcated. On the one hand, drive the business forward, set a standard. I mean, we would love, and I think we can, and I think we're already on the path there to set the bar. Right? This is the bar for where modular, single family affordable modular housing is. We're going to keep raising that bar, and we'll challenge everyone else to keep up with us. But that's our thinking for the moonshots.
That's beautiful. That's great. And let's take let's get another podcast in a year from now, and we'll we'll discuss your growth. That's
I think,
wonderful.
I think Arc Build is going to be a tremendous story. We're documenting a lot of what we're doing, and again, this is not to sound crass in any way, but we are documenting a lot of what we're doing. We think there is, and there's going to be a great story behind Arc Build. We have committed, dedicated people. We have a senior staff that is in very high demand, but we're here because we believe in what's going on. We're just blessed to have great people on the team. We have great investors who believe in us and given us their confidence and trust. And we don't see anything but greenfield in front of us. So we get up every morning excited to go do what we do. Truly.
That's great. That's great. But you have been in the trenches from funding to regulatory headaches to innovation. And for other funders or builders in the prop tech or sustainable infrastructure, what's something you have learned the hard way?
I always always get
A
asked that
lot.
question. Even going back to technology, a question similar to that always comes up. Looking back at my career, it became a couple of years back. The answer became crystal clear to me, and I don't know why I didn't realize it sooner in life. But the thing I learned is that without empathy, there is no success. There's no success as a person. There's no success in business. You need to show and feel empathy, whether it's for your clients and understanding their needs, or whether it's your team, or just virtually everyone around you. When you put just a little bit of empathy in, with some smarts, some determination, integrity, commitment, and honesty, when you mix those together, you get a formula for success. So that's the one thing I've learned is I don't like the expression business is business. I don't buy it. I don't believe that. That's me personally. I think people hide behind that. And I think if you put yourself in somebody else's shoes and sort of look at things from their perspective, you get a whole new, you get a whole new vision of what's going on. So don't get myopic. Don't get locked into your own head. Have empathy for what's going on and the people around you.
I love it. Yeah, empathy, definitely.
You won't get
And
that answer from too many business people, unfortunately, or they won't. They're not willing to admit it. So
to tell the truth, 71 podcasts, and I think nobody mentioned it. Um, I love it. And finally, what's the one mindset or belief that keeps you going when things inevitably get very tough?
well, I think it's my loyalty to my team and my commitment to my team, right, is always being there for them no matter what, and vice versa. I had a backwards career, Laurent, as from LinkedIn and our conversations. I started as an entrepreneur in software. I built and actually exited two companies, right? And then I went into Fortune 500, which again is sort of backwards, right? You usually start there. And I put in very senior roles with IBM, CA Technologies, which used to be Computer Associates, and most recently at Lenovo as the chief revenue officer of the software division. And then I went back into early stage again, which is where I am now. And the one thing I took with me throughout my career, and maybe to some instances to my demise and some to my success, was I've always had a fierce loyalty to people who are loyal to me. Um, and I think that's what keeps us all going. We believe in the vision. It's a common vision. We know our swim lanes, and we're all, exceedingly committed to one another. And it's always been that way in all the teams I've had in Fortune 500, in early startups, and here now at ARCBuild. We really are. We're a team, and that means the world to me, right? It truly does. What keeps me going is knowing that I love working with the people I work with. I like to think they feel the same, but again, you can interview them and see how they feel. But that's what keeps me going. I'm proud of these folks. I'm proud to call them, friends, and I'm proud of what we're accomplishing together.
That's great. Very very strong words. So I really appreciated the depth and clarity you brought to this conversation. It's rare to find someone who's thinking about housing not just as a product, but as a system and a team, a loyalty, and empathy, as you mentioned, for giving great advice. It's a living, breathing infrastructure that can scale sustainability. And Sal, I really thank you for your time. It has been great.
It was my pleasure. And look, I'm delighted to chat with anyone who watches this podcast, if for just the sake of networking, or if they'd like to talk to us
Where
about
can
what we're doing.
where can they find you
Well,
and your
you won't
team?
have trouble finding me on LinkedIn. There's not too many Salvatore Patalanos. You can certainly reach me at ARC. My email is very simple. It's my initials at arcbuild.io. So it's SP at arcbuild.io. And you can certainly go to the website, which again is arcbuild.io, and take a look at our most recent showcase. There's a video, and there's some beautiful stuff up there. Very simple, but to the point and direct, which is how ArcBuild operates. Not too much fluff, but a lot of substance.
That's wonderful. Tal, thank you very much.
Thank you, Laurent. It was my pleasure.
That's it for today's episode of the AI Interconnect podcast. And if you enjoyed it, share it with someone who's building the future, or better yet, someone who should be. And until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep building. Thank you.